everyone. So I am Nikki Perry. I am our Chief Revenue Officer here at Crunchtime. And I have the great honor of getting to spend the next 30 minutes talking to three really inspirational leaders from our industry here. So please join me in welcoming Devin Gaines, the Vice President of Ops Services for Popeyes Louisiana Kitchen, Diane Neville, Chief People Officer from Shake Shack, and Danielle Bischoff Forsyth, the Chief Technology Officer for 7 Brew. Welcome. All right, so we're gonna spend a little bit of time learning about each of your paths to leadership, maybe some challenges that you guys had to overcome, and how you've taken those lessons learned to create opportunities for growth and leadership within your organization. So why don't we start with a brief overview of your journey to leadership. So Diane, let's start with you.
Sure. So when I came out of college, I did business management because I had no idea what the hell I wanted to do with my life, to be super candid. But I quickly fell into HR because I realized the opportunity to really help people in that moment, whether it's creating a career for themselves, whether it's working through their benefits or their plans, whether it's what's the leadership development path for them. And I've worked in several industries, whether it was with McKesson, whether it was with small janitorial. And then I went to the hospitality industry with P.F. Chang's. And that's when my career really unlocked. I had great mentors that really sought me through and challenged me in different ways. I would tell you my biggest struggles was really to get my voice at the table for a while. And I persevered through grit. Grit was my opportunity for the senior leaders to see what I was willing to do that was outside my scope. And then I kind of got my own mentors from that path, whether it was co-CEOs or chief global individuals. And I will tell you, my biggest mentors were all men, surprisingly. So they were good allies. And but they pushed me beyond belief. To kind of be where I am. And my goal was never to be the chief or at the top, but I kind of fell into it just for the love of people.
That's great. Diane, when we were sort of prepping for this and we were talking about your journey here, I think something that you shared that I'd love if you could expand a little bit for the audience was how pretty early on in your career, you actually decided not to specialize. Mm-hmm. But instead to sort of seek broad exposure across the organization. Can you talk a little bit more about that decision and what you learned from that? Yeah,
early on in the career, I was kind of focused on the benefits and wellness plans. And everyone kind of said, oh, you're in that landscape, right? That's where you should stay. And I challenged myself to say, I am going to learn everything I can about every aspect of HR, whether it's workers' comp, recruiting, development. I didn't care what it was, but I was going to push myself in there to know it. And I really think that was why I'm where I am today. I have several individuals for me that are only in those worlds, whether it's talent, whether it's leadership development, total rewards. And they always say, I want your job. I said, then you better learn the other facets of HR. So I challenged myself by getting my PHR, making sure I really was going to understand, and I say it today, enough to be dangerous in every area. And that's when I think the senior leaders, for me, it was an unlock like, oh, she's gonna do that too? Wait, I didn't know you knew about that. Just created the opportunities for me. And I tell a lot of people on my team, I know there's a lot of specialists that want to be out there, this is my world. And I say, buck the system. Do everything you can to expand your knowledge. Learn the business, learn the financial aspects, everything that you need to know. And also, let's be honest, it's not boring. You get to really learn about a lot of different things versus just kind of being narrow.
Yeah, that's great. So not that there's anything wrong with specializing, but taking the time in your career to gain exposure really helps, I think, make you really well-rounded. And the tidbit that I love is that no one asked you to go do that.
Nope.
You raised your hand, you took the initiative, which I think is fantastic. Thanks for sharing. Sure. Danielle, tell us about your journey.
So some similarities, but some differences with Diane for sure. So I started my career, I was born and raised in Kansas City, and so one of the key employers there was Hallmark Cards. I had my computer science undergrad when I went there as a programmer. This is how I started about 35 years ago, so it's been a journey. I thought I was going to have my entire career there. So in my 28 years at Hallmark, very similar to what you heard from Diane, I started out and figured out that I wasn't going to program for my entire career, and I got into people and project management pretty early on, and so that set that path for me. But I think the reason why I'm here today is because the middle of my tenure at Hallmark, I was nicknamed the Queen of Laterals. And the reason for that was because I went and led every single functional area in IT, from strategy to delivery to cyber, infrastructure, you name it. I had an opportunity to lead in those spaces. And that gave me breadth of knowledge and a toolkit that I felt comfortable continuing to advance in the organization. And unlike Diane, in my case, I had mentors and a particular sponsor that actually kept tapping me on the shoulder for the next opportunity. And in reflection, I realized how lucky I was to have that, and that doesn't happen everywhere. And so what I did at Hallmark was join forces with a couple of other women in tech, and we launched a Women in Tech program. So we forced it to happen, to have mentorship, sponsorship, opportunities, rotations, learning, networking, development for the women in tech at Hallmark. And I think if I would say what is my legacy there, that was it. And then based on that, I got, I guess, a little bored after about 28 years, and an opportunity found me at Tyson Foods. And what it meant for me was a move from my family, which would have been the first. So it was a little bit scary. And it was actually for a position that my friends, what they asked me was, why would I move my family for a lateral? The job title was the same. It was business unit CIO. I was going from one industry to another. Why would I do that? And the reason I did was because it was an exciting opportunity to get into some really cool tech and to implement some awesome things for a company that was much larger than I was in, so it would be a different experience size-wise and scale, as well as industry. And so picked up, moved my family to Northwest Arkansas for the Tyson Foods opportunity. And then from there, very similarly, just took on, I said yes to everything. I just continued to take on additional responsibility there. I also co-founded a Women in Tech program. It was one of the reasons they reached out to me to join Tyson, was to launch that there as well. So I had a partner in doing that for all the same reasons. And then after about 5 years, I was a CTO. I decided to retire, you know the story. But I thought I was done, 35 years, felt pretty good. And after a couple of months, I got bored pretty quickly. And a former CEO at Tyson reached out to me and said, I want to introduce you to some people. Maybe you can help them. It's in the startup space. One of those happened to be 7 Brew Coffee. And again, I walked in, and what I would share with you is I didn't know restaurants. I didn't know size that small. I didn't understand scale that fast. I knew nothing of the players. You know, went in and I thought, why not? And jumped in and pretty quickly realized, you know, how much I love the company, the people, the opportunity to build a legacy, to build a team, to build a very aggressive technology roadmap. And it's been a great ride ever since. So that's been this year so far.
Love the why not.
The why not.
So good. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the lateral move, because I think I see this all the time, and I'm sure that we all have as well, where, you know, people that we work with feel like the only way to go forward in their career is to go up. But that's not the case, right? So is there what sort of lessons did you learn in becoming the queen of lateral moves, and what advice would you share with this group on that?
Yeah, and I appreciate you asking. It's probably as I mentor others, especially whether it's newer in career, mid-career, it's my biggest piece of advice. Number one, build a great network. I think that's incredibly key. I mean, we don't make it to these positions without our teams and support and sponsors. So that's the first one, is pay attention to your network for certain. The second one is say yes for the opportunities and don't just create a career plan that says, I didn't say I want to be CIO and therefore I have to go, these sequential moves. It never works that way. And so for me, I will share with you the reason why the lateral movement was so important was, number one, it built my network. So every job I took in a different space, I had a whole new set of business stakeholders, different teams, great peers to work with. So that's one great aspect. But the other is it gave me confidence that as I learned new skills in those new positions, the next position I took, I carried those with me. And so I just kept adding, tools to my tool belt as I proceeded, and it gave me confidence that when I took the next role, that I felt confident I could do it based on the experience I had. And so that for me was important to continue to advance.
Oh, I think that's so great. And so I think my big takeaway in this is gained experience can be garnered across all different types of opportunities. And in many cases, what may be perceived as a lateral move really is building a new skill set. That I always have this visual every time we talk of this tool belt, right? And adding more to that. I think it's fantastic. Thanks for sharing. All right, Devin, tell us your story.
Hi, thank you. Great to hear your stories. Certainly a lot of similarities for me as well. Probably one unique thing is that I actually started working in restaurants very young. My parents were franchisees for a brand that I then went on to work for 12 years. So really was kind of born into it. Didn't always love it. Didn't love making pizzas for my parents in high school. However, in college I went on to work for a different franchisee in the same system, and that's where I really saw the business from a different perspective. And learned to love it. And so I started working for Domino's right out of college in a leadership development program. And really, I loved working in the restaurants. As I mentioned, when I got into more people management and multi-unit supervision, I really thought, okay, this is something I'm very passionate about. I just love the element of owning your community and employing, kids from the city and things like that. And so as I kind of looked at my career ahead as an early 20-something, I thought, this is something I want to stay part of, but similar to your stories, I really wanted to learn more aspects of the business and what it meant to be in operations. So I spent several years just kind of going through all the natural roles, company ops, Fran ops. I moved to the headquarters in Ann Arbor and took on some training roles. And I similarly had a lot of male mentors that were really great and often tapped me for different roles, which was excellent. But I found myself at a place in my late 20s where I thought, I keep doing what everyone else wants me to and not necessarily checking in with myself to make sure I'm doing what I want to do. And something I had thought from an early age that I wanted to do is live and work abroad at some point. And I worked for a huge company in many countries across the world. And so I started to ask about opportunities in international. Around 2017, about 7 years into my career, so I had the opportunity to go to Europe as an operations consultant and then earned my way to operations director, and then kind of had a similar checkpoint. I thought, okay, I've really seen every side of operations, of training. What more is there that I can learn in this business? And similarly had a mindset, I thought I could have my whole career here if I want to, so what else can I learn? I ended up becoming essentially the general manager of the Europe region for Domino's and oversaw 26 countries' operations and everything from supply chain to franchising and so many unique opportunities I learned through that. 5 years in though, I thought to myself again, okay, what do I really want and what do I love? And if I look ahead to the next couple decades of my career potentially, where do I want to spend those? And I thought, okay, time to go back to operations. And so I at the time, I was thinking about making a move back to the US as well, and an opportunity with RBI and Popeyes fell into my lap, and I came to Popeyes in 2022, and then I was promoted to Vice President of Ops Services at the beginning of this year. So found my true passion and kind of started there, and I'm here now. And certainly I think the most fun part of my job is working with different people, working with our franchisees, meeting people like you all and the folks I've reconnected here with at the conference. But really, I think some of the lessons I learned are to always check in and reflect and see what do you want out of your career, and making sure you have the right folks advocating for you and who really understand those desires. And I think most companies want to find a path for you to stay there long term, and you have to have the courage to really know yourself and know what you want, and have people who are fighting in your corner for you.
Yeah, that's great. I love that lesson. It's something that I think we all can lean into. I'm also curious, so your background is a little bit different, but I think actually well represented across the entire group, right? Of being born into the industry, growing up in the industry. What lessons did that early part of your career give you with that deep exposure on the operator side that you're now using now that you're on the brand side to help accelerate and empower your team?
Yeah, great question. I think I learned a lot of, frankly, hard lessons working as a general manager of a restaurant, a district manager of a restaurant at 21, 22, 23 years old. It's always in the back of my mind what it's like to be on the front lines, working in our restaurants, owning our restaurants. The franchisees are probably the part of this industry I'm most passionate about, and I think having that unique experience of having seen my parents' side of things, and long nights, weekends, and ultimately deciding to sell their business, that was a difficult choice as well. And so for me, the ability to understand the corporate side of things, but also connect with the franchisees in a different way than probably many people in my seat have in the past, I think is a unique element that I bring, and something that I really cherish, and I try to make sure I represent well when I'm sitting in meetings in our headquarters. I'm always speaking about the needs of the team members, the franchisees, and making sure that we all remember that their success is our success.
That's great. Well, thank you all for sharing your story. I now want to pivot a little bit and talk a little bit about how you guys have created opportunities for growth and leadership within the organization. Before we get there, I think it's important just to sort of baseline talking about representation in the workforce. And so there have been a lot of studies out there. We've seen it, I'm sure many of us in the room have, that talk about how in industries at large, women generally make up around 50% of the workforce. But in the restaurant and food service industry, women actually make up more than 50% of the workforce, which is fantastic, right? That means we're creating opportunities here. Now, what I think is interesting is as we think about the fact that women make up more than half of our workforce in this industry, yet historically, right, are generally underrepresented inside of the C-suite or executive leadership roles, it presents a unique opportunity to sort of think about why and what we can do to help change a little bit of that dynamic. So Diane, I'm curious, as you think about this, what are some of the things that you're doing at Shake Shack to help change a little bit of this?
Yeah, sure. And obviously a big struggle for us, right? We are growing at a clip at a rate that's so fast. Just to give you an example, my new metrics that I shared with the board was in the next 3 years, I need to hire and develop 1,800 managers and 58,000 team members. Whoa, that's a lot. And I have to have great leadership development programs and unlock programs that will really make sure we are staying true to who we are, right? Stand for something good and make sure that our teams at the higher levels in the home office or in the multi-unit are really matching the demographic inside our organization and the communities we serve. So one of the things that we've done, we started this about 2 years ago. We learned that we created a program that was specifically meant for individuals, people of color and females in the restaurant industry. And we put in a rigorous 16-week training program because what we learned was there was a ton of them that wanted to be in leadership and in management, but they didn't have the confidence to get there. And we learned this through a round table. And it was after like a town hall session, we were just all kind of shooting around. We said, when are you going to be the next GM? When are you going to be the next multi-unit? And they said, oh, I couldn't do that. I just couldn't do that. Why not? And we learned that it was really just barriers such as, I'm just not great at Excel. I'm really not great at having difficult conversations. I'm not great at really understanding the P&L. Unlock. So we created a 16-week program for anyone. They have to be nominated. They have to apply. They have to make sure they really want to commit to this. And in the first 2 years, we said it is only going to be women and people of color because that's what we're focusing on. Now everyone clamors to be in this program. So we've probably put close to, I would say, about 900 individuals through it now. 78% of them have all been promoted into higher level to even reach within that time frame. Now, 2 have been promoted into multi-unit. So we had to create what are we trying to solve, and we went very intentionally against it. Now we're saying, let's take to the next level. So we're really going to double down, and we call this shift up is what the program is. And now we're doubling down on now taking GMs and how do they get prepared for multi-unit. And then how are we getting them cross-functionally into the home office to look at other areas of business, whether it's HR, whether it's ops services. A lot of them want to go into ops services, right? And really unlocking that and making sure that part of it's just confidence is the barrier. And we didn't think about it that way. We always thought it was other things, whether it was their home life or childcare or whatever. And that just really wasn't the case. So doing the deep dive on what are we trying to solve for, and it has just been wildly successful for us.
Oh, I love that. Mm-hmm. So Danielle, we just heard Diane talk a little bit about what they're doing. What are some of the things that you're doing at 7 Brew?
Yeah, so I couldn't agree more with very structured programs that help ensure, like I mentioned, women in tech. We, absolutely involved in that. There's, women's employee resource groups are important. But I think what I would share with you is, because again, those are critically important. But if you don't have those at your organization, I will say that in general, we all have the ability to make a difference. And I received a bracelet a few years ago from a very trusted ally that I have, and he gave me a bracelet. On the inside, it was inscribed, "Empowered women empower women." And this means so much to me because what empower means is to put power in. And so this means that anybody can help encourage, can help make opportunity, can help make connections for women in the organization. And when that happens, it just continues to spread like wildfire. So when somebody does something, whether it's a male ally, whether it's another woman, makes an opportunity, helps provide training, an opportunity to go to a conference, introduces them to somebody, encourages them to take a role that they feel like they may not quite be ready for, and supports them in the process, that is a way every single one of us can make a difference. And you do that for one person, they'll do it for another person, and it will continue to grow within the organization. So if you're sitting there thinking, I don't know what I can do, everybody can either empower another woman in your organization, you can sponsor somebody, you can set up a formal program. That's the ideal situation where you have a framework and a program, but we can all do something in that space to empower.
That's so great. Sometimes it is as simple as just tapping someone on the shoulder and saying, do it. Go for it. You never know. Devin, I know that you've personally benefited from some of this. Can you share your story?
Yeah, I certainly, as I mentioned in my career, I was lucky to have, in the leadership of the companies I worked in ops, we didn't always have a lot of women, of course. And so I said I had a lot of different men advocating for me, which was great. I had one mentor in particular when I was younger, though. She was always kind of the only woman at the VP ranks in the company. And she really, essentially did exactly what you shared, just gave me the opportunity to, express interest for things. She asked me what I wanted to do. When there were different roles that I mentioned, moving to headquarters to work in training, which I had no experience in, she was the person who really tapped me for that. And so so that was a great lesson for me to learn early, and in a way that I've tried to live that and kind of give back and pay it forward to your point. I really try to be generous with my time, and I think that's the biggest thing I can do is talk about my journey, give my time to folks, whether it's just a simple coffee chat or my favorite thing is when I'm on the road and I'm with franchisees and restaurants, I'm meeting managers who aren't our employees, they're franchisees' employees, but I noticed early on they're always curious about me, and so I kind of just move with transparency and I'm willing to answer any questions they have because I want them to see that they could be in my seat someday. And I think that's something I saw, although limited, I really saw it in this one mentor early on. And so as I've moved, up in my career, I've really tried to always remember that and try to represent that as well.
Yeah. So that's a fantastic example of how you directly benefited from that mentorship. As you've moved into operations at Popeyes, what are some things that you're doing now to scale your individual experience more broadly across the brand?
Yeah, I'm really excited at Popeyes and in RBI in general. The brands have women's networks that were already established, and I think in the last couple years, we've in the Popeyes team, we've really tried to put more effort in supporting the women's network. Those of us who are on the LT who are female are very involved in the activities, but the group really it's a run by a volunteer board essentially, and they're members of different teams across the brand. I have, for example, someone who's in the lowest part of my hierarchy. She's on the board of the women's network. So even someone more junior in their career has the opportunity to have this kind of informal leadership role within the brand. And we work closely with them to identify different opportunities to bring in outside speakers or create activities that bring women together and give us the opportunity to have these conversations, or even to just participate in development activities together. Despite rank, we're all there as women, as leaders or future leaders wanting to learn and grow together. And I think it's been a great way to put more focus on women, and especially in ops leadership. I really encourage my team members to all participate. And we have an informal mentor kind of program through that as well that I think has been really beneficial, where again it kind of gives folks access from different parts of the brand to folks like me, even though they're not directly on my team.
That's great. I'll take a quick moment to remind you all, as we come up towards the end of our session here, that you can ask questions through the app. So we're going to start to open up for questions here shortly. So please don't hesitate to start typing away here. So one thing that is very clear through all of your journeys is mentorship, right? Mm-hmm. And we've talked a little bit about training programs. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about mentorship programs because they are different. Mm-hmm. And they are actually, I think, a little bit complicated and hard to scale and sustain, right? Because it requires time, and probably one of the few resources we all have is time. So, Diane, in your role as Chief People Officer, what are some things that you think about and or advice that you'd give to the group on how to actually create a programmatic mentorship program that not only launches but sustains and continues to add great value across the organization?
Yep, so we launched about a year ago now a formal mentorship program, and we launched it through Workday. And what it allows everyone to do is to go in and say, these are my skills, this is where I'm good. And generally, depending on your level, we open you up to be a mentor or be a mentee, right? So you can have all these options for what you want. And then what are the competencies you're trying to work on? And we do a matching system. And it allows us to automate it, which makes it much faster, right? And so you may get, when you punch in all your stuff, you may get 3 people in the organization that are available for you. And it's decide. Have a conversation with them, maybe, and they've already said, hey, I'm willing to be a mentor. So they're able to, the dialogue is already there that we're gonna do this. So they'll have 15-minute chats to see, and then generally they pick one. Sometimes they pick 2. So that's like a formalized piece. And we make it a 12-year or 12-month commitment, not 12-year. That would be too long for everybody. But you'll see how, like I've had individuals come to me like, oh my gosh, I really enjoyed mentoring this person, but I think I've hit my unlock. I really can't get them to like this next level. So we will actually have people kind of go back in the pool and we will talk about it during our like 9 box. It's a very structured, like who is that person's mentor if they need one, and we talk about it often, and you'll see on the executive team and the leadership team, hey, I know a person that's perfect for this. So we really talk about it a lot. So if you can't do the formalized, because it does take time, there's no doubt about that. I think one of the other things is that just really making sure it's always top of your mind. If you have someone on your team that's really good, but there's like ask them, what do you want and who is your mentor? It doesn't have to be someone inside the company, but challenge them to think that. I also believe some people think it has to be this formal. All my mentors were completely informal. There was never a conversation like, you, me, what do you think? You know, like it was never like that. And next thing you know, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm sitting in the co-CEO's office and he is like taking me under my wing. And they still ping me and we still talk today. Yeah. But I made it not so structured because I wanted it to be informal. I didn't want to feel like it was a project. Yeah. That was my other piece. So I think you can approach it a few different ways, but we've had great success with it.
That's great. I'm going to open this up to anybody. So we've been talking a lot about finding coaching opportunities for mentees. What about mentors? Are there things that you guys have seen in your career to help a mentor continue to be good at mentoring?
We provide a lot of tools in the Workday thing. We make sure we have, whether it's articles, whether it's a guide for them to really kind of unlock and make sure the conversation's productive and it's not like, how was your weekend, right? And that we share with the mentees that this time is important to them. So you need to come in prepared. If you're not willing to come in prepared, don't waste anybody's time. Like you have to want to do this and you have to know what your plan is. So, but we give a lot of tools. There's a whole library of stuff for them.
That's great. I think those two things are probably the biggest takeaway that I'm walking away from, which is the program doesn't have to be incredibly formal, but it is going to be so much more successful and impactful if we take just a little bit of time up front to set the rules of the game, right? And make sure that everybody is on the same page and that each party is coming prepared. This is a very intentional thing. This isn't just a coffee date, right? And I think that's so important on really finding a program that is sustained and not something that is super popular and then sort of fizzles out because no one really knows what we're doing here.
Yeah, we actually had a process where every 6 months you re-up the relationship and just ask the question of, what are you hoping to get out of this the next 6 months? And it's both sides. I mean, mentor and mentee relationships, I mean, both people benefit immensely. Sometimes the mentors benefit more than the mentee, especially if you have reverse mentoring. Some of my best mentor relationships were peer mentorships, where we both had an opportunity to learn from each other and made it more formalized and talked about what do we want to get out of this over the next 6 months or 12 months or whatever duration you think makes sense. Having that conversation up front helps kind of guide then whether you eat monthly or whatever frequency, what the conversation is going to be, what the agenda is going to be, what you're both going to bring to the table. Yeah, it's incredibly helpful.
I love that. I think as I mentioned in our women's network, we set the ground rules essentially, as you mentioned, and just said, hey, the leadership team members are involved in this community. We are open. Our time is open. It starts with you setting up the time, and that's how we know to start engaging in this informal but yet kind of formal way. And I think that helped, just having that initial conversation, kind of presenting, listen, we're open for you. We want you to reach out to us and tell us what you want to get out of the time, and then we're willing to give it. And I think that's helped. It's also helped me have some opportunities to say to my team members who didn't take advantage of it, hey, what's going on? Who are you reaching out to? And so it's a new, but it's something I think that will work well with our folks.
Yeah, I think it's as easy as the ask. I mean, if you want to mentor, just ask. I mean, you'd be surprised how many people will say yes. And if they don't say yes, they will likely connect you with somebody they think would be a good match for you. And then I think on the flip side of that, if you're looking to be a mentor, work with your peer group and offer to them that you're willing to offer your time and spaces that make sense for you to be a mentor in. And likely those individuals have people in their organization they will match you up with based on their need. So I think it's just a matter of speaking up.
That's great.
Yeah, and make sure in the beginning, I would say like 4 years ago, we decided to try this, and we literally made sure everyone on the ELT took someone, and it was all across the business, whether it was operations or a GM. And one of the GMs, I ended up getting the COO, and at one point she's like, I don't even know what to say. Like it was too far of a disconnect for the two of them to help each other. So like that's why now it's like, let's base this on skills and competencies. So make sure there's a good match.
Yeah, I actually think that's really important. So what I heard is, hey, you don't have to have a C in your title to be a mentor.
No, not at all. Right.
God, no.
Everybody has incredible knowledge that they can share depending on where you are in your journey. Okay, so the theme of the conference is growth. I think we've just had a really great, healthy conversation around how focusing on our people and representation within our people can help fuel that growth. Yesterday, we had some great discussion around data and how organizations are thinking about leveraging data to fuel growth. Danielle, I'm gonna throw this one to you. As CTO, right, of 7 Brew, which for those of you, if you're not familiar with 7 Brew, pick your head up. This brand is growing like
Breakout brand of the year from QSR magazine.
It's amazing.
It is fun.
I think you're at a really interesting intersect here, and so I'm curious, how do you think about balancing this focusing on growing people, on technology, on data, to fuel what is a really high growth brand?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. You have to do it all. I mean, it's not just focus on one. I mean, without a doubt, we actually spend 1/3 of our time on our data and analytics work. So within my team, we track where we invest our time, and based on just the need of our business partners, it's 1/3 on continue to build out our data lake, continue to put analytics on top of that, continue to push out reports. I mean, so that's a big focus. So and in a growth model that we're in, understanding where our sales are coming from and how we can continue to propel that is number one priority. So without a doubt, we're working on that 1/3 of our time. And as far as the growth side of things, again, when you're in a situation where we're growing the brand, we're almost doubling in size each year for multiple years. From an implementation standpoint, I mean, growth is the name of the game. And so it's, from my perspective as the technologist up here, it's what technology tools can I put in the hands of my partners to be able to achieve those business goals. And so our entire focus is on what do they need to make sure to propel this brand, similarly to this, what we've done the last couple of years. And then, of course, the people side is incredibly important. We don't do this without the people. I mean, they're the ones that make this happen. And so making sure we're getting at 7 Brew, it's interesting because I would say we were more of a startup. And this year, we're progressing almost to $1 billion in sales pretty quickly. And so the growth of people, we're hiring like crazy. And so making sure that we're hiring the right people, making sure that we're putting the right systems and processes in place to help them grow and learn, making sure they understand career paths, making sure that our culture is one that continues to be maintained. And so the people aspect, we absolutely have an eye on that because it is the people that makes this happen. Yeah. So it's not a focus on one, which is probably what you were hoping for. It is a focus on all 3 of those concurrently.
Yeah. So you mean high growth isn't easy? We don't just get to do one thing?
It's fun.
No, that's great. So I've got one more question, but I will pause. And Cindy, sounds like we may have some questions.
We have had so many great questions coming in. We're actually heading into a 30-minute break, but I'd like to take another 5 minutes because this has been such a great conversation. Is that okay if we do some questions?
Yeah.
All right. And they've been upvoting. I mean, so I'm going with the ones that have the most votes. So the first one, and this is open-ended. I think, Nikki, you can decide who to have answer. How do you recommend navigating your career in a company that primarily has a male leadership board?
Anyone want to volunteer?
I'll jump
Okay.
in. So I would tell you in the tech space is probably a double whammy. We've got just a couple of statistics. We are at 25% of female within IT. 18% of the Fortune 500 CIOs are women. So we continue to see a situation where that is the case anyway. And then as you go in leadership across the board, to the question, the percentage of women, even though we're over 50% of the workforce in every industry, on average, we continue to see less than half as you go up every level in the organization. Middle management's 33%. And so you start to see this dynamic, and the numbers are the numbers. They're the facts. That's just the numbers are it. And so I would say that male allyship is key. That is the number one for me anyway, the answer I will tell you. Making sure, it's why I love standing up the Women in Tech programs. It's why I was sponsor for our Corporate Diversity and Inclusion Council at Hallmark, our Women's Employee Resource Group at Tyson. It's why it's a topic of conversation at Brew. I think talking about it with everyone, this is an opportunity. The numbers are the numbers. So what are we going to do to bring equity? And everybody is accountable for that. And so I think the important thing is that we talk about it, we put systems in place to help. Mentorship is key. We've all three talked about the importance of mentorship and allyship, number one. So male allyship. There's the word empower, and I mentioned it earlier, means to put power in. And so to leverage the power of those that are in power is absolutely key, and continue to advance equity in the workplace. And so engaging those men, engaging the allies, getting them involved, helping them understand the opportunity and how they can make a difference is the in my perspective, number one thing to make happen and get involved.
I was just gonna say, go for it. I think there's a lot of the philosophy of like, oh, it's more men at the top. You might be shocked by going in and saying, hey, I wanna ask you something. Would you spend some time with me? You'd be amazed how many men are willing to be really strong allies. But you gotta ask the question. 100%. You gotta go for it.
Yep, totally agree. Very well said. I think knowing the folks too who are making some of those decisions and who's going to be in the room talking about things like the 9 box, like those are conversations you have to have and make sure that they can represent your interests and that they're going to support you in those conversations. So being a little bit strategic about the allyship too, I think has really helped me. And and again, I mean, men, in the room, I think just noting the folks, especially if you're a people leader on your team, that, you're maybe not as sure about their career aspirations, or you maybe see some potential in them, but you haven't had those conversations. Have those conversations too, because it really unlocks, for a lot of women, it unlocks that fire that, lets them go after their dreams. Yeah.
And then on the flip side of it, I will add, it's really interesting. A lot of times you hear among women, they see it as a competition, and that there's limited room, as you proceed, which the numbers do say it does get smaller, but there's really unlimited opportunity. Yeah. And so I think in addition to the male allyship, I think, making sure that the women that are in leadership positions are active and continuing to help and to lift as they rise and to help establish programs like you've heard about is really, really important too.
Okay, great, thank you. This is for Diane. Can you describe more about your 16-week development program? Is it online courses only? Are there in-person meetings, Zoom meetings? Are there workbooks? Who facilitates all of the above?
Actually, we created this program with a company called Food Education Fund. It was a nonprofit, and they work in New York City, out of New York City, and they had a program that 2 of our GMs had gone through, right, to kind of get into the hospitality world. We partnered with them and created it specifically for Shake Shack and what we want these individuals to learn. So we spent 1 year co-doing it with them. It was video conferencing. They had to go to class regularly, and then they had homework, and then she would also do one-on-ones with them. We liked the program. We spent a lot of time developing the content, so we have now brought it in-house. And so now we facilitate it. We do a big graduation, but we don't pull everyone into the, what do I want to say, the home office or anything like that, because it's just, we're doing 4 of them a year, big graduations. It's just an expense. But it is mostly online, a lot of one-on-ones, and then we bring in, my leadership development team spends a lot of time with them checking in, making sure, like we know, I think there's been 5 that have been kicked out because they didn't keep up on the things. And we're not going to put you through. Like, you got to do your work. You got to be in it. So we're kind of maniacal about that as well. We just want to uphold the standards of what that program is. I hope that helps, whoever asked.
And I think this will be the last one. And it's a really nice, interesting question, I think. What is the best way for a male, me, not me, but the asker, to help start champion a women's leadership development program without it seeming like it's a quote-unquote man's idea? I would like to help make this more of a priority in my organization, but I'm not on the leadership team.
Ooh, the not on the leadership team is an interesting aspect. You need executive sponsorship in general to help make a formal program happen. But you also, just like the CTO at Tyson reached out to me when I was at Hallmark and said specifically during our first conversation, you know, I want you to come in because you're a technologist, number one, but number two, I want you to start a women in tech program here. So find somebody that you believe would be passionate about getting the other women involved in a program. And actually, it's hard work, by the way, these programs. You know, Diane makes it sound so easy, and it's a lot of work. It is a lot of work to make happen, and so you need somebody that's going to put the energy in, that you can partner with, that can be kind of the face and the champion of making it happen. And then I'd work on the executive sponsorship side. I would get somebody on the executive leadership team to also sponsor the effort if it's going to have any chance at, you know, not only being started but being sustained as a priority at the company.
And
that would be my perspective.
If someone knows you're passionate about it, I think
Right.
it does. It's the passion piece. Like, if you're passionate about it, someone is going to be your champion with you and help you unlock that. No one's gonna be like, no, that's a dumb idea. Like, I don't want, like, that's not gonna happen. You just have to be able to like have that conversation. You'll be amazed how many are willing to do it. Because like
And
you
then
said,
they'll pull their friends
it is,
in.
yeah,
And then
like,
it'll become a group effort
like
that
you
helps
said,
make it happen.
the shift up started because there was 3 people that got really passionate about it, and then it was an unlock. And then everyone wanted to be it. Can I come in and speak? Can I, you know? And that's why we're just launching it at different levels now.
I think too, you know, the benefit of attending these conferences is that you're learning things, you're building a network, and when you go back to work, someone should ask you, what did you learn? And I think this is one thing that you could easily bring up and say, sounds like a really powerful tool in some of these companies, and it's something I'd like to see here.
It's a great idea, yeah.
Okay, back to you, Nikki.
All right, well, thank you all so much. I think this was just an incredible session. I think we all took away so many things that we can start advocating for or actioning immediately. And so we just thank you guys for spending your time with us.
Glad to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you all.